shadows of history.
On the morning after the September 30th events of 1965, as confusion gripped Jakarta and military units consolidated control, a foreign diplomatic telegram was reportedly transmitted. Within 24 hours, it vanished from official circulation. Not archived, not referenced, not acknowledged publicly. In moments of political collapse, communication becomes power. Every message sent between embassies can shape recognition, support, or silence. So why would a telegram disappear at the very moment a government was falling? Was it misfiled, withdrawn, or intentionally suppressed? In the Cold War climate of 1965, Indonesia was not merely a domestic crisis, it was a geopolitical chessboard. Western governments, regional allies, and intelligence agencies were watching closely. This investigation does not claim hidden conspiracies. Instead, it examines the documented gaps, missing cables, delayed disclosures, and inconsistencies in archival releases. Because in history, what disappears can matter as much as what survives. By 1965, Indonesia stood at the intersection of global ideological rivalry. President Sukarno had pursued a balancing act between nationalist forces, the military, and the Indonesian Communist Party, one of the largest communist parties outside the Soviet Union and China. To Washington, London, Canberra, and Moscow, Indonesia was strategically critical, rich in resources, commanding vital maritime routes, and politically influential across the developing world. Diplomatic cables from the period, now partially declassified, show intense monitoring of Indonesia's internal tensions. Western governments feared communist expansion, regional powers feared instability. Intelligence agencies increased reporting frequency. Every signal mattered. In such an environment, diplomatic telegrams were not routine paperwork, they were instruments of strategic assessment. If a cable disappeared during this moment, it would not have been insignificant. It would have been tied to recognition, reaction, or recalibration. The events of September 30th remain contested in interpretation, but their consequences are undeniable. Several high-ranking Indonesian generals were abducted and killed. Within hours, Major General Suharto began consolidating military authority. Confusion dominated the capital. Competing narratives emerged: an internal coup attempt, a communist plot, a military maneuver. Amid the chaos, foreign embassies transmitted urgent cables back to their governments. Declassified diplomatic records from the United States National Archives and British Foreign Office confirm rapid diplomatic reporting. Yet historians have noted irregularities in some archival sequences. Certain communication references appear in summary logs but are absent in released collections. Whether due to classification retention, destruction, or bureaucratic omission, gaps exist. And in historical research, gaps demand scrutiny, not speculation, but documentation. On the night of October 1st, while Indonesia's capital trembled under confusion and gunfire, foreign embassies were not asleep. Declassified diplomatic cables show heightened activity within hours of the first reports. Telex machines clicked relentlessly. Intelligence briefings were compiled in real time. Reports were transmitted to Washington, London, Canberra. The question was not whether something extraordinary was happening, it was how fast global powers could interpret it. Some telegrams described the situation as a premature coup attempt, others speculated on internal army divisions. But here is what stands out. Certain cables referenced lists, names, and political alignments long before the dust settled. How did they know so much, so quickly? And why did some follow-up cables disappear from official logs within 24 hours? When governments move faster than events themselves, you have to ask, were they observing or anticipating? In geopolitical chess, reaction speed reveals preparation, and preparation suggests prior knowledge. One of the most controversial revelations from later declassified archives concerns the existence of political watch lists. These were not speculative rumors. Documents released decades later show foreign intelligence agencies tracked thousands of Indonesian political figures associated with left-leaning movements. The argument has always been framed as containment policy, a Cold War strategy to prevent ideological expansion. But the ethical question remains: did information provided by external actors accelerate the scale of repression that followed? Some historians argue these lists were merely analytical tools. Others suggest they became operational instruments once violence escalated. The timing is crucial. Within weeks of the coup attempt, systematic targeting unfolded across the archipelago. Was this spontaneous chaos, or was there structured coordination fueled by intelligence flows? When you overlay diplomatic traffic with events on the ground, patterns begin to emerge, and patterns in historical investigation are rarely accidental. History is often revealed not by what is present, but by what is missing. Researchers examining diplomatic archives decades later found irregularities, gaps in chronological sequences, missing reference numbers, entire telegram chains that appear to stop abruptly. Some documents are heavily redacted, with entire paragraphs blacked out. Governments justify redactions as necessary to protect sources and methods. Fair enough. But when redactions obscure policy intent rather than operational details, skepticism becomes rational. In one archival release, a cable references a follow-up strategic alignment discussion, yet the document detailing that discussion is absent. Was it destroyed, misfiled, or still classified? Absence is not proof of conspiracy, but systematic absence across multiple archives raises legitimate historical questions. When documentation of a pivotal moment contains deliberate silence, historians must read between the lines, and sometimes the silence speaks louder than the surviving words. To understand 1965, you cannot isolate Indonesia from the Cold War map. At the time, Indonesia was the fifth most populous nation in the world and strategically located along vital maritime routes. Its political alignment mattered enormously. Washington viewed Southeast Asia through the lens of domino theory. If one nation shifted left, others might follow. Beijing and Moscow were expanding ideological influence. Against that backdrop, Indonesia was not just a domestic battleground, it was a strategic prize. The stakes were not symbolic, they were geopolitical. So when instability erupted, foreign powers evaluated outcomes not through humanitarian optics, but strategic calculus. Which faction would stabilize the country in a direction favorable to their interests? Declassified policy papers revealed discussions framed around regional balance and long-term strategic alignment. Notice the language, not morality, not sovereignty, but alignment. In great power competition, stability often means predictability, and predictability sometimes outweighs democratic complexity. As power consolidated in the months following the turmoil, international recognition moved quickly, diplomatic normalization accelerated, economic cooperation resumed, financial institutions opened doors. Publicly, statements emphasized stability and reconstruction. Privately, strategic assessments described Indonesia as returning to the Western orbit. The speed of international re-engagement is striking. Transitional justice was not the headline, international realignment was. Does recognition imply orchestration? Not necessarily, but rapid endorsement during unresolved domestic trauma invites scrutiny. International actors rarely intervene in visible ways. Influence is subtler. Diplomatic signals, intelligence sharing, economic incentives. When a new political order emerges and global powers swiftly embrace it, analysts must ask, were they merely opportunistic adaptation or the fulfillment of prior expectations? In geopolitics, outcomes often validate strategies conceived long before the public ever hears the first gunshot. Among the most persistent claims surrounding this period is the story of a foreign telegram transmitted hours after the coup attempt and reportedly withdrawn or reclassified the next day. Some archival researchers have referenced it indirectly through citation trails, yet the original document remains elusive. Was it routine diplomatic analysis, or did it contain language too revealing for later release? Governments revise, reclassify, and sometimes seal documents for decades. That alone is not scandalous. But when a single communication sits at the crossroads of intelligence flow, diplomatic positioning, and subsequent policy shifts, its disappearance becomes historically significant. We may never see its full text, and perhaps that uncertainty is the point. History is not always erased loudly. Sometimes it is simply archived into obscurity. The missing telegram of 1965 does not prove a master plan, but it forces us to confront a deeper question. Who controls the narrative of turning points? and how much of what we call history is actually curated memory. History is rarely erased entirely. It is redacted, delayed, fragmented. The missing telegram of 1965 may never resurface in full form, but its absence highlights something deeper. In moments of geopolitical transition, information itself becomes strategic terrain. Indonesia's transformation in 1965 reshaped Southeast Asia's alignment during the Cold War. Foreign governments adopted quickly. Recognition came, aid flowed, policy shifted. Whether the vanished communication altered those calculations or merely reflected them remains unresolved, but the pattern is clear. When power changes hands, archives often change with it. Subscribe to Shadows of History for deeper investigations into the hidden documents and strategic decisions that shaped our world.